Hi, everyone. We're going to start in just a couple of minutes, so please hang tight. I'm very glad to see all of you here. My name is David Dodd. I am the Chief Executive Officer of the International Sustainable Resilience Center. I'm also the Vice Chairman of the Institute for Sustainable Development. We are partnering to launch an Academy of Community Resilience and Development. This course is an introduction to that academy, but there will be much, much more taught to empower communities, states, local governments, uh, county governments to have the ability for their own selves to become more resilient. As we know, there have been some major changes with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and more the burden of, not the burden, the responsibility of disaster recovery and resilience is going to be given to the states and therefore to counties and communities. So, where we are starting is with economic resilience. My background is economic development. All those letters you see after my name are all certifications in economic development. And so it's a natural thing for me to be teaching this today. We want this to be interactive. Please don't hesitate to put questions in the chat. Stephen Jordan, who's my partner in crime, the CEO of Institute for Sustainable Development, can read those to us as we go along. So, what is economic resilience? It's really resilience through the economic lens. We know resilience is the ability of a community to better withstand and recover more quickly from adverse events of any kind. Economic resilience is dealing with the businesses and economic development efforts to be able to do that. Incidents, though, we have a broad definition. Natural disasters, man made disasters. I worked for 2 years after the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. Uh, I guess now it's called the Gulf of America, uh, helping fisheries in the affected areas recover. So man-made is just as damaging as natural disasters, but also includes pandemic, economic upheavals, civil unrest, acts of terror, armed conflicts, and now the newest is cybercrime and cyber attacks. And the fact is that, according to the United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction Office, cyber attacks are 4 times more likely to occur during and immediately after disasters. So those two really are intertwined. So when we think about that, how do we master this? How do we master economic resilience? Well, the first thing is looking at economic development initiatives that create long-term economic stability. And we have a terminology here: stresses and shocks. So stresses are chronic issues, whether that's the economy not being very stable, not being very diversified, whether that's infrastructure that's decaying. Those are all stresses. And then when the shock occurs, uh, the the response for post disruption recovery is so important because shocks are disasters. And so I live in New Orleans, very familiar with hurricanes and what they can do and how destructive they can be. But there are all types of disasters, both again natural and man-made. Tornadoes are an issue in a lot of places now. And the other thing that's really important is that whether or not you believe that man causes climate change, there's no doubt, it's just a fact that things are changing. Disasters are becoming more severe. They're becoming more frequent. Again, highlighting the absolute need to be more resilient. So again, if you are thinking about uh, these other things such as cyber threats, terrorism, of course, the pandemic was, we all know what kind of destruction that did to our economy. But again, all of these things are really looking at how they affect the economy and the economic shocks. Artificial intelligence is, again, there are predictions that it's going to have a massive impact on employment, on the ability of communities to attract new jobs and investment because of the the efficiencies that AI creates. And again, as it continues to evolve, there is a real fear that it's going to create massive employment disruptions. That's as much a disaster as a hurricane or flooding. So what we want to try to do is take a three-pronged approach. The first is planning, and that involves identifying the economic vulnerabilities, developing strategies for long-term durability. The second is establishing information networks. The most important, I've been asked this many times. I've been doing this, by the way, for 20 years. I started in this with Hurricane Katrina. And I've been asked along the way, what's the most important ingredient in making a place more resilient? And it is absolutely communication and collaboration. Those are the most important things. So once you have your vulnerabilities identified, then you start putting together people that represent different parts of the community. And I'll also ask, well, who should be in an economic resilience committee? And I say everyone, because although we don't think of social organizations, religious organizations as a part of the economy, in fact, they do, and they have an influence on the economy. So when you put together a group and you're looking at economic resilience, you should have broad representation from throughout the community. The other thing you should always do, always start with your emergency management organizations in your city, your county, your state. They need to be at the table absolutely from day one. They play a critically important role. You can't have a really great recovery. You can't be really resilient without having that response mechanism plugged into everything that you're doing. And the term resilient recovery came about after uh, after a significant significant uh, weather event happened in Oklahoma. They had 5 tornadoes. They had massive flooding, and in recovering from that in 2014, we first came across the concept of let's make this place recover better, build back better, which is what FEMA now says. Make this recovery something that's going to strengthen the community, that's going to strengthen the economy for the next time. So again, what how that manifests itself is again collaboration, private, nonprofit, local, state, and federal organizations all working together. That's the way this happens. So, what are the steps? There are 6 major steps. The first is again to organize. I've already spoken to the what you need to do to form a task force for economic resilience, bring everyone to the table, and then do a comprehensive assessment. Where are the vulnerabilities in your economic structure, the types of companies you have, how well are those companies doing, but also the physical side, the infrastructure. How is your infrastructure? How are your roads, your bridges? If you're in a port city, how does your port? If you have an airport, how resilient is your airport? I worked for 5 years on and off in Puerto Rico for recovery from Hurricanes Irma and Maria in 2017. And one of the things we looked at was what would happen over time with sea level rise to Puerto Rico's major airport in San Juan. And what we found that you put that out 20 years based on projections of sea level rise, and in the case of a hurricane or a major flood, that airport would be underwater. So this is what you have to do. You have to look out, not just what's happening today, but look at what could happen in the future. And doing those assessments helps you understand the need to be better prepared. So, again, identify your shortcomings based on that assessment and then gain knowledge. And we're going to go through some sources of information and knowledge. It's really important. And there's almost, in my opinion, too much information out there about disaster resilience, but that's better than not having enough. And what we've seen globally, and this affects every community in the United States and every community in every country, is we've seen a rapid increase in investment from large organizations, philanthropic organizations, also development banks around the world in what they call climate adaptation. We don't say that in the U.S., but that's really what it is, and that creates both opportunities and maybe some risks because you can have too much money sloshing around and some of it could be wasted. So we really have to keep an eye on where we are investing, how we are investing, and what is the return in terms of reduced losses in the case of a disaster.
David,
Yes,
I have a quick question for you. Who owns the development of all of this? Who should be driving this? Is this something that emergency management should be
no,
driving, or
no.
do you see it as being driven from the chief executive's office of the city or the
It's a
county?
combination, Stephen, of the community's leadership or county leadership, state leadership, and the economic development organization has to play a critical role in this. And there are very few communities, even smaller ones, that don't have either access to either their own economic development organization. More rural communities generally have regional economic development organizations. And many of you are familiar with economic development districts that are partially supported by the Economic Development Administration. There are almost 300 of those around the country. And if you're in a smaller community or rural area, that's who you should be talking to. And the
There's a follow-up question here.
Yeah,
What should the relationship be with the emergency managers?
I already said it. They have to be at the table. You have to reach out to them right away. You cannot do this successfully without involving the emergency management organizations that serve your community, whether that's local, county level, or state level. They need to be at the table because what you do is going to impact them, and what they do is going to impact you. So that's the answer. And then the other thing that is really important is where are you going to get the resources? Where are you going to get the funds? I just talked about this rapid increase in funding for resilience, but a lot of that's occurring in less developed nations. So here in the U.S., where can you go? And there are sources. Again, private foundations have really stepped up in their commitments to funding uh, uh, resilience operations, and your industries should also be invested. Again, ownership is far superior to passivity from your business community. And believe it or not, they're gonna see. They already do see. They see the benefit in this for them. The number one cost of disasters, economic cost of disasters, is not direct damages. It's business interruption. It's interruption of the processes, interruption because your employees are preoccupied trying to recover themselves, interruption with your suppliers, with your customers, transportation issues. That's the number one cost. So you really focus. You have to start there and looking at, okay, what do we do to minimize the disruption that's going to occur to our business community? And then the last thing is creating a step by step action plan. What are you going to do first? When are you going to do that? Who's going to be responsible for that? How do you measure that? And why? Why are you doing this? All of those questions have to be answered. Going back to identifying the vulnerabilities, that first photo is a port in Japan. I was honored to develop the economic recovery framework after the Japan East Coast earthquake and tsunami. And that tsunami carried that boat and put it right on the dock. So, you have to look at, okay, what are the things that we really are most vulnerable with? What are those things? Again, if you're in a low-lying area, do you have flooding issues? If you're in an area that's prone to hurricanes, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with tornadoes? How do you deal with wildfires? I mean, our friends in California are still trying to recover from that. So again, the economic challenges that could arise, and when you're looking at this, is are you dependent on just two or three industries? How do you focus on those industries to make sure they are as resilient as possible? What are the workforce education gaps? Having a well-educated workforce and having the skills that are needed is so important, especially after a disaster, because they've got to make up. They've got to make up for lost ground. What are your infrastructure deficiencies? Broadband access is still an issue in a lot of rural America, even today. Uh, Now we have the satellite systems now that can make up for that, but is everyone plugged into that? Again, you cannot have a decent recovery without robust communication. And so if you recognize these weak points, then that helps you understand what are those steps you need to take to make your economy more resilient. So the early warning issue has really risen to the top of the heap when it comes to uh, making places more resilient. So economic dashboards and reports, collaboration with emergency management agencies, and there is such a thing as a business emergency operations center. And that basically is a place that's very well protected, that's safe, that has redundant power, so that can be a spot of communication and warning for businesses, for the business community. And there were several of these in operation, and FEMA actually has a guide on its website about how to establish one of these. And you don't think about millions of dollars. Think about having a place where the emergency management people can interact with the business community and give them the information that they need to make decisions about how they're going to withstand this event, this disruption. So again, these are all things that are critically important, and it goes back to that one thing I keep saying is communication. So you have to be flexible as well. So, do you have emergency funds for business? There's this concept, and it's really important because according to FEMA, within 3 years after a major disaster, up to 40% of businesses are going to fail. 40%. And if you have businesses that are damaged, that have again interruption, they're not bringing in customers, or they're having issues with their suppliers and their customers. If they're a manufacturer, uh, then they're going to need money, and they're going to need it right away. And the problem is this thing called the valley of death is the time between a major disruption or hazard, as they're called, and the time that federal and state funding can arrive. And that's where a lot of businesses fail. So if you can take steps to to secure some commitments. You don't have to raise the money and have it sitting in a pot. You can have commitments from, again, financial institutions, other organizations, that they will help raise just a small amount of money for each business. My dear friend Rob O'Brien is famous for leading the recovery of Joplin, Missouri after it was destroyed, completely destroyed by a huge tornado. And in the business community, they were all saying, "There's no way we're going to survive." Well, Rob and some of his colleagues raised funds. They raised funding to be able to help these businesses, and the funding, the assistance they were given was not hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's enough for them to survive. 20,000, 15,000, and that's been cited as a best practice nationally and internationally because it's so important and it's often so overlooked. So the the best way to prepare for something like this is to simulate it. And there is a whole discipline in what they call tabletop simulations. So you gather everyone, you say, we've been hit by an F5 tornado. This is the damage. How do we deal with this? And that kind of real life simulation can really help when that disaster actually does occur. Workforce adaptability through retraining programs is really important. There are funds for dislocated workers who've been dislocated because of changes in the economic landscape due to disasters or due to upheaval. Again, hazards are there. So look into that. And again, we have some website addresses coming up, and we'll share this obviously with everyone. The meeting's being recorded. You'll be able to see it on recording too. The other thing that you have to do is you have to look at the region that you're located in. What is the regional vision? What are the strengths that you can promote to attract investments, to diversify your economy? Highlighting assets and opportunities, encouraging proactive resilience measures, and frame shocks as opportunities for reassessment. Who would have ever thought we would call a disaster an opportunity? But it does create an opportunity to really see where your weaknesses are in your economy, where the things that are most vulnerable need to be addressed. And again, information, communication, that is it. So collaborating across sectors to share information and data post disruption. What happened? How can we recover from this? And then how can we recover in a way that makes us stronger the next time? Mobilizing support, getting everyone in the community involved. And I have a couple of examples of that a few slides ahead of this. Enhancing preparedness through role awareness. Who's doing what? Who's responsible for what? And if there is a gap in that, who can fill that gap? Those are all really important questions. There's a great example of this type of information and collaboration through the Louisiana Business Emergency Operations Center. And so there were 8 regional economic development organizations, economic development districts they're often called, in Louisiana, engaged with the Louisiana Business Emergency Operations Center. So Louisiana had an emergency operations center, but it was an overall one. But what they did is they said, let's focus on the businesses, and we'll set up within the overall emergency center. We'll set up a subset of that to deal specifically with the business community. And so it provides real-time communication during disasters and programs to help businesses prepare before the disaster. So that's an important component of resilience. You don't have to have one of these, but if you have an emergency operations center, if you're working with your emergency management organizations, you can often find that that's a way to do that. And it's again something that most any community can do.
From my mom and from Granny. Fine.
So the thing to really think about is having all this done before the disaster. So develop comprehensive strategies to align economic development with hazard mitigation, to promote major employers for prioritize major employers for quick recovery. Generally, in most communities or cities, you're going to have major employers that really are the backbone, and they support all the other businesses, whether it's suppliers, small business suppliers, or the restaurants and the grocery stores and the places where people that are paid by that industry go shop. You have to keep all of that in mind, and then support local procurement and hiring during recovery. A friend of mine in coastal Louisiana, Lafourche Parish, that is very prone to hurricanes, and also with coastal erosion in Louisiana. A lot of money was going to huge contractors, uh, both for recovery and for, again, coastal protection. And so they established a coastal procurement assistance center that helps these smaller contractors, these smaller businesses, understand the process and understand how they could either contract directly for recovery or subcontract with a larger contractor. And it's been a real success. I would encourage you to check that out. So, what are the components? What are the development practices? Well, the components are diversifying, again, to stabilize economies. And we've all, anyone in economic development knows about cluster based developments where you focus on uh, groups of industries that have come to an area because of certain positive reasons, and you work with those to help them continue to grow and diversify. It really helps in the diversification issue of an economy, so it's not dependent on just one or two industries. And now there's a movement. This is being led by the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, and it's called No More Disasters. And one of our uh, wonderful fellows, Steve Kaufman, loves to say that. We create disasters. There are hazards, there are events that occur, but it turns into a disaster when we're not prepared. And a lot of that has to do with where things are built, how well they're built, and the issue of making places. And this goes down to homes. This goes down to from all the way at the big infrastructure facilities down to the homes, making sure that they are ready and prepared. The tiny town that I grew up in, 1,600 people, uh, there was a flood in 2016, significant flooding, and they had a water intake that was only 4 feet above the water in this river that flows through that town, and it was rendered useless because the water flooded it's electrical motor. The water flooded it, and the town didn't have any water for about 2 weeks. Well, you imagine that going without water. And so the solution was not complicated. Just raise the pump, raise it, 10 more feet, so that happens again, it's not going to go out. And again, we tend to overcomplicate things sometimes, and the solutions are really simple. Supporting workforce adaptability with new skill development programs. The Workforce Investment Opportunity Act provides for funding for things like that can help the workforce be more agile, be ready to shift if there's a shift in employment because either of a disaster or in many communities, again, the tiny community I was raised in, we had a horrible disaster. It wasn't natural. It was the closing of the two really anchor businesses in that community. And we had to really focus on how are we going to bring more industry in? How are we going to bring more businesses in that can support the community? And then the other thing is avoiding floodplain development. That goes back to no more disasters. If you allow development in a floodplain, then you're asking for problems. And everyone hates the word planning and zoning, but the fact is sometimes it's very beneficial for the community to have standards and to have identified these risks and trying to mitigate those risks through a variety of means, including standards for how things are built. Japan is a very earthquake prone country. And in Japan, they have extremely tight regulations on where you can build, how you can build, how massive, how resistant to earthquakes those structures have to be. And when the Fukushima earthquake and tsunami, the East Coast earthquake and tsunami happened in Japan, it wasn't the earthquake that did the damage. It was the tsunami because most of the buildings in those communities were earthquake proof. So again, you really need to be thinking about these things. Preserving natural buffers. The new buzzword in resilience is nature-based solutions, and things like mangrove groves that can protect from serve as a natural barrier to flooding and hurricanes, to coral reefs, which also act as a barrier, to planting vegetation to absorb some of the stormwater that comes when flooding occurs. Those are all important solutions, and there's a lot of information on how you can do that in your community. And then protecting your critical infrastructure, protecting again your water, your electricity, and now of course communications, your telecommunications. Protecting that is so important, and there's a reason they call it critical because it's really necessary for a community to be able to both resist the damages but also recover more quickly. So, resilient recovery strategies should have these elements. First, defining the roles and responsibilities. That's so important. And again, putting a task force together and defining those roles is the very first step you have to do. And then prioritize the actions. What are the things that need to be done now? What are the things that are urgent and important? We all remember Stephen Covey and his four areas as urgent and important, important but not urgent, uh, urgent but not important, and neither one. And so you have to stay with the things that are urgent and important first. That's where you have to prioritize. What things need to be done right away, and how important is it these things are done. And then integrate your resilience into your economic development goals. I mentioned the economic development districts that are all over the United States. Chances are you are covered by an economic development district. They are required. They have to submit a 5-year plan. Every 5 years, they have to what they call a comprehensive economic development strategy. For about 12 years ago, the Economic Development Administration said, "Guess what, guys? You can't submit a plan and have it approved." And that's how that's their justification for providing grants and for providing support for these economic development districts. You can't have a plan approved unless you have a component that deals with disaster resilience. And the guidebook to show these organizations how to put together these economic development strategies is 28 pages, and a fourth of that is dedicated to resilience. That's the importance that the Economic Development Administration puts on resilience, and it's the importance that all of us should put on economic resilience. So the Oklahoma Resilient Recovery Strategy, that is really the guidebook that was adopted by FEMA in in moving from just recovery to resilient recovery. And there's a link to it there. It was done 10 years ago, but the principles don't change. They're still very relevant. And then this is what's really important to me. Again, coming from a very small community, this is not just for cities. communities of all sizes can have resilient recovery. There was a huge tornado just north of Little Rock, Arkansas, that destroyed two communities, one tornado, and they were about 20 miles apart. Mayflower, which is closer to Little Rock, and then Bologna, which is about 30 miles from Little Rock, and Bologna was destroyed. 85% of the businesses in that town were inoperable, and they worked so hard to ensure that those businesses could survive. One thing they did is they converted the school's gymnasium into a mini mall where these businesses could all co-locate and people could still shop. They could still, make things and sell things, and that was huge, a huge help in their recovery process. The other thing they did is they they teamed with a nonprofit organization called Kaboom, and Kaboom provides playground equipment for underprivileged areas. Well, they were disaster stricken, so they qualified. And this is again, this is a town of 4,200 people. There are over 500 people that coalesced in one day and rebuilt their park that was destroyed using that equipment, using their own donations and equipment, and it was remarkable to see. And then in Choctaw, Oklahoma, which is a little larger, it's a suburb of Oklahoma City, 12,000 people. It's where the Choctaw tribe is located. But the community, they were hit hard with high winds and flooding. And so what they decided to do was create a mutual aid network where the businesses in that community would come to each other's assistance, would actually lease out a part of their operation space to allow their businesses, the same businesses in the community, to continue to operate, which is so important. So, economic development organization, you asked this question, Stephen, early on. They should lead the effort to coordinate recovery initiatives, to serve as data hubs for economic resilience, to be a liaison with federal, state, and local agencies for the economy, for the economic recovery. And a best practice example is an economic development organization in Northern California. It's north of Sacramento, two counties that have a robust resilience effort. And they looked at all of these things: workforce, they looked at housing, they looked at their supply chains. Are the businesses in that community able to source locally in the case of a disaster and they have other suppliers that may be cut off? And they looked at healthcare. And they inserted all of that into again, they're an economic development district that I mentioned, and this is their comprehensive economic development strategy. And that component is very robust. So I left the website address there for that. So we have to get down to who's going to do what, by when, how are they going to do it, and how do they measure the results. So this is really at the heart of economic resilience. So you start with the values of the community. What is the vision that the community has to be able to preserve its economy and recover more quickly? How does that convert into a mission? And the mission is taking the vision and putting it into action. And then SMART goals, which we all know, they're strategic, they're measurable, they're time sensitive, they're embedded with this issue of how do we build resilience in the economy, and then the actions. So again, they have to be measurable because you want to be able to show, and this is something those of you that have connections or are in economic development, the newest risk, major risk in corporate investment decisions is a disaster risk. So if you can show that your community your economy is taking steps to be more resilient, then that's going to lessen that risk, which is what economic development's all about. It's lessening risk. It's lessening risk and increasing return for companies. So if you can do that, then you should promote that. We have an economic resilience strategy. We're working that strategy. Here's what we've done. That's really, really important and can really help in attracting jobs and investment. So I have current underlined and in italics because we don't know what's going to happen with FEMA. Just events that happened this week lead to the understanding that FEMA is not going to be what it was. But right now, they still have these resilient recovery tools. If you are affected by a disaster, one of the things that you can do to try to help yourself recover and be more resilient is apply for a hazard mitigation grant from FEMA, and those are given to communities, but they have to go through this process of showing that the benefit of that grant is going to outweigh the cost. And so FEMA has a great tool, and it's called a benefit cost analysis. If I can run it, anyone can run it. I'm technologically impaired, and I have no problem using that tool. So I'd ask you to take a look at it. And then there's the National Hazard Risk Assessment Program that looks at hazard risk, looks at disaster risk. How do you assess that in your community? And this is overall, not just your economy, but your community as a whole. And they're intertwined. Your economy can't be resilient if your community is not resilient. And then Hazard Loss Library, which has assessments, tools, and shows you how to use those. Recovery Resilience Resource Library, again through FEMA. And then Risk Map, which is a multi-hazard risk estimating tool that's offered by FEMA. So there are some tools out there now. Now, how long they'll be there, I don't know. So don't wait. Make yourself familiar with these, because you can learn from every one of those. You can learn valuable lessons. Uncertain times demand new action. And this is the introduction to the academy. So the Institute for Sustainable Development, the International Sustainable Resilience Center as partners, we see the need to train and build capacity in state and local jurisdictions. And in response, we are launching this academy for resilient economic resilience and development. And the real purpose of this is to applied learning is the most effective method of learning. So we want to do regionally based in every region of the country that we can, applied learning taught by seasoned professionals, leading to a certification program. So this is our attempt as two nonprofits to come together and put on a training and skill development program for communities, for counties, for states that are being faced now with this new responsibility. And it's designed to build this capacity for long-term resilient recovery, and embedding resilience in every step of recovery. And we are really uniquely qualified to lead this because we have over 60 professionals between the two organizations who are all seasoned professionals, not college interns. Nothing against interns, but the people in both of our organizations have the capacity to really educate and share knowledge and again, real life experiences with communities and counties and states. Here are some additional resources. IEDC really has, and one of our fellows in the Institute for Sustainable Development, Lynn Knight, developed this. It's restoreyoureconomy.org. It's by the International Economic Development Council. If you're in economic development, you know what that is. But that site is really, really effective, and it can really help you fill in the gaps between what I've said today and run through today and what you really need to do. So I would highly encourage you to see it. And then FEMA, again, has this Business Emergency Operations Center guide. I told you about that earlier. And then the National Association of Development Organizations, which is the National Association of all the economic development districts around the country. They have a comprehensive economic development strategy resilience guidance, and it's located there. So, in conclusion, and I hope, Stephen, we have some questions to read off. As disasters continue to become more intense, more frequent, we're going to have to embed resilience into our economic efforts, into our economies. And again, reducing impacts and accelerating recovery, that is why we do this. And our academy is designed for that purpose to empower states, counties, and communities to shape their own future. We are applying for grants from the Economic Development Administration to launch this in at least 3 regions of the country. All of those grants require a 25% match. So we're asking you to inform your networks, let them know that this is happening and that this funding is really needed, and it's needed to help to help communities, to help counties, to help states take on this additional responsibility for recovery from disasters. So, Stephen, what do we have? We have questions.
Well, I'd like to flag Iva Kaufman, if you want to come off mute. Love the applause too, by the way. Okay, while
Yeah, I mean, did you want me to pose the question?
yes, please.
Oh, yeah. So my question is, have you been collaborating with Richard Sealine at Future Proofing America, formerly the Resilience Innovation Hub? They were intimately involved in the designation of the resilience zones during the Biden administration.
And
Yes, we know
it,
Richard and have
yeah,
worked with him. I'm actually Richard's on my advisory board. I'm actually one of his advisors as well. So yes, the answer is yes.
and
Terrific. Okay, so we can figure out how to cross collaborate here.
yeah, and Iva, can you tell us a little bit about the American Sustainable Business Network?
Oh, sure. American Sustainable Business Network is a nonpartisan affinity of business leaders focused on sustainable and regenerative businesses. It's existed for now since the early first Obama administration and works across a number of policy issues. It's really the voice of business leaders on policy issues that are fundamental to regenerative strategies, circular economy, and it's organized by affinities and working groups. It umbrellas probably over 100,000 businesses if you count the B Corps and the Bali members who are a part of it.
Well, thank you for joining us. David,
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was directed to you by Richard Sealine, the former policy director at ASBN.
well, thank you very much for joining us. David, there are 2 questions that are kind of like together here.
Okay.
Um, One is, how do we get started? You know, if the county doesn't have any of this in place, uh, how does it get started? And then the second part of the question is there a county that X, Y, or Z person could look to maybe serve as a model?
The first part of that is bring everyone together, and I listed off the entities and the people that need to be at the table. So you need the community leadership, you need the county leadership, you need the emergency management, you need the Chamber of Commerce, the Economic Development Organization, community organizations, again, faith based organizations. Everyone needs to be at the table because everyone in a community is dependent on the economy of that community, right? I mean, unless you're in a city that has nothing but wealthy investors, I mean wealthy people, you pretty much need the economy, and even wealthy people need their Ferraris and their Porsches. So that's the answer though, is to pull everyone together and say, look, we've heard this, we believe this is something that's really important. Can we work together to try to implement uh, actions that can make our economy more resilient? The second part of that is there are several great examples of communities and counties that have come together. Moore, Oklahoma, was destroyed by a tornado in 1999. They rebuilt, and then it was destroyed again by a tornado in 2014. That community is about as resilient as you can get. It's a community of about 25,000 people. It's a suburb of Oklahoma City, Deidre Bolton is their economic development person, and she knows resilience better than most of us. So we can put you in touch with her if you'd like to talk to her about what they've done, because it's amazing. It really is.
If I can add a little bit, I think part of what this person seems to be getting at is that they don't have a budget, and they're trying to figure out how to mobilize support to have that convening.
Right.
And I would just say that this is one of those situations where emergency management often has uh, the resilience brief right now. And it's very important, I think, for economic development leads, business support organizations, et cetera, to be additive and to be complementary. And if you frame it right, you can be going to the emergency management community and saying, hey, look, we can add to your capabilities. And if you can make it clear that this is about bridge building and networking, there are a lot of emergency managers who are receptive to this. And I kind of liken it to the within a business, how the engineers think marketing is like strange voodoo, and the marketers look at the engineers and see math and run away. But
Yeah.
both are complementary to each other, and you have to have both functions within to have a successful enterprise. And this is one of those situations where the emergency management and the economic development folks really need to complement, because the emergency management people are doing a great job. It's amazing. It is just absolutely amazing that fewer than 300 people were killed with Hurricane Helene, or that what 35 people died because of the Los Angeles wildfires. Now, every death is terrible, but when you compare that trajectory to what it was, the emergency management community is doing fantastic. The problem is that they are getting dinged and scored because of two factors. One, the displacement of people, and two, the economic costs, which have doubled every decade since FEMA was founded. So the emergency managers have an incentive to work with you and to partner. And so that's why what just to add on to what David was saying is that if you don't feel like you have budget and you don't know how to get started, the best thing to do is to go to the emergency managers and say, "Hey, we're on your side. And if we work together, then you guys won't get dinged for things that they're not that you shouldn't be responsible for. And on the other hand, we can help our community in terms of risk adjusted rate of return because we're lowering the risks and enhancing community continuity." Thanks, David.
Anything else? Anyone else? Well, you know what? I subscribe to the rule that uh, if you can finish early, you've got 10 points on someone that finishes late. So I'll take that 10 points. Thank you all so much for coming. This has been really great, and hopefully, again, if you have follow up questions, do not hesitate to contact us. You have you have the ability to do that because you're all, you see everyone else on the invitation. And I'd love to hear from some of you and have some more discussions, as I know Stephen would as well. So thanks
Can I make
everyone.
one quick advertisement?
Sure.
Next week on December 18th, a number of fellows of the Institute for Sustainable Development and ISRC are going to come together at noon Eastern Time to talk about which communities have inspired them this year in terms of resilience, or for larger cities or countries, what programs or policies have helped to move the needle in resilience. So if you are interested in joining, it's free to join. It's going to be an expert discussion on, which communities have really gone above and beyond this year. And I think all inputs are welcome.
Well, that's the answer to the question that the attendee asked about. Can you cite some examples? We're gonna have some really great examples at that event. So thanks for mentioning that, Stephen.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone, thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day. And again, we're here. Don't hesitate to contact us.
Thanks, everybody.
You very much.